Think about the last time you really wanted something from another person. Maybe you wanted a better price, a higher salary, someone's approval, a business deal, a favor, or simply for someone to see things from your point of view. What did you do? Did you explain yourself more? Did you talk faster because you were nervous? Did you immediately lower your expectations because you were afraid they would say no? Or perhaps you tried to convince them that your offer was the best one. Most people approach situations like these as if getting what they want is mainly about having the right words. It isn't. Sometimes, the person who talks the most has the least influence in the room. Sometimes, the person who appears to have the most power actually has the weakest position. And sometimes, the most important thing you can do in a negotiation is absolutely nothing. Just wait. Listen. Let the other person speak. Because getting what you want is rarely about forcing someone to give it to you. It is about understanding what makes them willing to give it. That distinction changes everything. A good negotiator doesn't walk into a conversation thinking only about their own objective. They are thinking about the person sitting across from them. What do they want? What are they afraid of? What are they trying to avoid? What matters to them more than money? And perhaps most importantly, what happens if they say no? That last question is where real leverage begins. Because the moment you become desperate for an outcome, you start giving away power. You accept terms you don't like. You explain too much. You reveal how badly you need the deal. You become afraid of silence. You become afraid of walking away. And the other person can feel it. This is why negotiation is not simply a business skill. It is a human skill. You negotiate when you buy something, when you ask for a raise, when you settle a disagreement, when you convince someone to support an idea, when you decide where to live, what to pay, what to accept, and what you are no longer willing to tolerate. In one form or another, you are negotiating throughout your entire life, and the people who become good at it aren't necessarily the loudest, most aggressive, or most intimidating people. Often, they are the calmest. They know what they want, but they aren't desperate to get it. They listen carefully. They ask better questions. They understand the other person's interests. And they know that sometimes the strongest position you can take is being completely willing to walk away. Because the art of getting what you want isn't about controlling people. It is about understanding people. And once you understand that, you begin to see negotiations differently. You stop asking, how do I convince them to give me what I want? And start asking a much more powerful question. How can I make saying yes make sense for both of us? That is where the real game begins. The person who needs it less has the advantage. Most people think negotiation begins when two people sit across a table. In reality, it begins much earlier. It begins the moment one person needs the outcome more than the other. Imagine two people selling the exact same product. The first person desperately needs the money to pay this month's rent. The second has enough savings and is happy to wait for the right buyer. They may be offering the same product at the same price, but they are not negotiating from the same position. The first seller is under pressure. The second seller has options. And options are one of the greatest sources of power in any negotiation. This is why desperation is so expensive. It changes the way you speak, the way you think, the way you make decisions. You begin making concessions before anyone has asked for them. You accept terms you would normally reject. You start chasing agreement instead of evaluating whether the agreement is actually good for you. The other person may never know your situation, but they often sense it. People are surprisingly good at recognizing urgency. They notice when someone is trying too hard to please, when they speak too quickly, when they keep justifying themselves, when they seem afraid of hearing the word no. The irony is that the harder you try to force a deal, the weaker your position often becomes. Real confidence sounds different. It doesn't rush. It doesn't beg. It doesn't need to win every conversation. It simply presents value, listens carefully, and is prepared to walk away if the terms don't make sense. That doesn't mean becoming cold or arrogant. It means refusing to let fear negotiate on your behalf. One of the biggest mistakes people make is believing they must always reach an agreement. But not every deal deserves a handshake. Some opportunities cost more than they're worth. Some partnerships create more problems than they solve. Some victories become expensive mistakes because you ignored the warning signs simply to avoid losing the deal. The best negotiators understand something that most people learn too late. Walking away is not failure. Sometimes it is the smartest decision you can make. In fact, your willingness to walk away often changes the entire conversation. Why? Because it shows that your decision is guided by value, not desperation. It tells the other person that you know your worth, that you're prepared to wait rather than accept something that doesn't align with your standards. This mindset changes more than negotiations. It changes relationships, business, careers, even everyday conversations. When you stop acting from a place of need, you begin making clearer decisions. You become more patient. You ask better questions. You notice details you would have missed if you were only thinking about getting a quick yes. And perhaps that is the first lesson every great negotiator learns. Power doesn't come from speaking the loudest. It doesn't come from dominating the room. More often, it comes from having the freedom to choose. Because the person with genuine choices is rarely the person negotiating from fear. Understand what they really want. One of the fastest ways to lose a negotiation is to assume you already know what the other person wants. On the surface, the answer often seems obvious. A customer wants a lower price. An employer wants to hire the best candidate. An investor wants a profitable business. But if you stop there, you're only seeing the position they're taking, not the reason behind it. Good negotiators learn to look beneath the surface. A customer asking for a lower price may not actually care about paying less. They may simply want to feel they're getting good value. An employer may not be looking for the most experienced person. They may be looking for someone they can trust under pressure. An investor may not be chasing the biggest return. They may be trying to avoid unnecessary risk. The question is no longer, what are they asking for? It's, why does that matter to them? That single question changes the conversation, because people don't make decisions based only on logic. They make them based on priorities, emotions, fears, and expectations. The better you understand those things, the easier it becomes to find common ground. This is why listening is one of the most underrated negotiation skills. Not the kind of listening where you're simply waiting for your turn to speak. The kind where you're genuinely trying to understand. Pay attention to the words people repeat. Notice what excites them. Notice what makes them hesitate. Sometimes, what isn't being said is just as important as what is. The more people feel understood, the more willing they become to understand you. That doesn't mean agreeing with everything they say. It means making them feel heard. There's a big difference. Many negotiations become arguments because both people are trying to prove they're right. Very few are trying to understand each other. When that happens, both sides become defensive. They stop listening. They stop thinking creatively, and the conversation becomes a battle instead of a search for a solution. The strongest negotiators avoid that trap. Instead of making assumptions, they ask thoughtful questions. What matters most to you? What concerns you about this? If we could solve that problem, would it change how you see the deal? Questions like these do something powerful. They invite information instead of resistance, and information is valuable. Every answer gives you a clearer picture of what the other person is trying to achieve. Once you understand that, you stop negotiating against them. You begin negotiating with them. That's when the best agreements happen. Not because one person wins and the other loses, but because both people find a solution that makes sense. People often remember how a negotiation made them feel long after they've forgotten the exact numbers involved. If they feel respected, they're more likely to trust you. If they feel pressured, they're more likely to resist, even if your offer is reasonable. Trust is difficult to build, but once it's there, it becomes one of the strongest forms of leverage you can have. In the end, negotiation is less about changing someone's mind and more about understanding it. Because the moment you understand what truly matters to the person sitting across from you, you're no longer guessing. You're having the conversation that actually needs to happen. The power of framing. Imagine two people offering you the same opportunity. The first says, this investment has a 90% chance of success. The second says, there's a 10% chance you'll lose your money. Logically, they're saying the same thing. Emotionally, they feel completely different. That is the power of framing. Framing is the way information is presented. It doesn't change the facts. It changes the way people interpret those facts. Whether we realize it or not, our minds are constantly influenced by context. A restaurant doesn't simply sell food, it sells an experience. A luxury watch doesn't only tell time, it represents craftsmanship, status, or identity. A job isn't always about the salary. Sometimes it's about flexibility, purpose, or the opportunity to grow. People rarely buy the thing itself. They buy what they believe that thing will do for them. Great negotiators understand this. Instead of listing features, they talk about outcomes. Instead of focusing on what they're offering, they focus on the problem they're helping to solve. Think about the difference between saying, "This laptop has a long battery life," and saying, "You can work all day without worrying about finding a charger." The product hasn't changed. The frame has. One describes a feature, the other describes a benefit. The same principle applies far beyond business. If you're asking your manager for a raise, don't make the conversation only about what you want. Frame it around the value you've created, the responsibilities you've taken on, and the results you've delivered. If you're persuading a team to support your idea, don't start with why it's exciting to you. Start with why it solves a problem they already care about. People naturally pay more attention when they can see themselves in the story. This is why empathy is such an important part of negotiation. The better you understand someone's perspective, the better you can present your ideas in a way that makes sense to them. Notice what this is not. It isn't manipulation. Manipulation hides the truth. Good framing reveals the truth in a way that's relevant to the person listening. There's an important ethical difference. A manipulator tries to trick people into making decisions that benefit only one side. A skilled negotiator helps both sides clearly see the value that's already there. That's why trust matters. If people believe you're exaggerating or hiding something, the frame collapses. But when your words match reality, framing helps people recognize opportunities they may have overlooked. In the end, negotiation isn't about having the cleverest argument. It's about making your message meaningful to the person hearing it. Because people don't respond to information alone. They respond to the meaning they attach to that information. And the person who understands that has already changed the conversation before the decision is even made. The power of silence. Silence makes most people uncomfortable. The moment a conversation becomes quiet, we feel an urge to fill the gap. We explain more. We justify ourselves. We lower our price before anyone asks. We reveal information that no one requested, all because we mistake silence for a problem. It isn't. More often than not, silence is simply someone thinking. One of the biggest mistakes inexperienced negotiators make is believing they must always keep the conversation moving. They answer objections too quickly. They interrupt. They rush to defend their position. In doing so, they often weaken their own argument. Imagine you've just made an offer. The other person looks at you, but says nothing. 5 seconds pass, then 10. If you're uncomfortable with silence, you'll probably start talking. "Well, I suppose I could lower the price a little. Or maybe we can change the payment terms." Notice what just happened. The other person didn't ask for a concession. You offered one, not because they persuaded you, but because the silence made you nervous. Experienced negotiators understand something different. Silence creates space. Space for people to think. Space for emotions to settle. Space for the other person to reveal what's really on their mind. Sometimes, the next person who speaks gives away the most valuable information in the room. That's why patience is so important. When you ask a thoughtful question, don't rush to answer it yourself. Let the silence do its work. People often reveal their priorities, concerns, or hidden objections simply because someone gave them enough time to think. Silence also communicates confidence. It suggests that you're comfortable with your position, that you don't need to chase agreement, that you're willing to let the conversation unfold naturally. This doesn't mean becoming cold or distant. Silence should never be used as a weapon. It should be used as a tool. A calm pause is very different from trying to intimidate someone. The goal isn't to make people uncomfortable. The goal is to give the conversation room to breathe. The same principle applies outside formal negotiations. When emotions are running high, silence can prevent an argument from becoming something neither person can take back. When someone feels heard, they become more willing to listen. When someone feels interrupted, they become more determined to defend themselves. A well-timed pause often achieves more than another explanation. It gives both people a chance to think instead of simply reacting. In a world where everyone is trying to be heard, the person who genuinely listens becomes remarkably rare, and rarity has value. The greatest negotiators aren't remembered because they always had the perfect response. They're remembered because they understood that every conversation has a rhythm. They knew when to ask, when to explain, and just as importantly, when to remain silent. Because sometimes the strongest statement you can make is giving the other person the space to make the next move. Know when to walk away. There is a question every negotiator should ask before entering an important conversation. What will I do if they say no? Most people never ask it. They spend all their time preparing for a yes. Then, when the conversation doesn't go as planned, they begin making emotional decisions. They lower their standards, accept conditions they don't really agree with, or promise things they know they can't deliver. Not because the deal suddenly became better, but because they became afraid of losing it. This is where preparation matters. Before you negotiate, you should already know what you're willing to accept, what you're willing to compromise on, and what you're simply not willing to give away. Without those boundaries, every decision becomes emotional. With them, every decision becomes intentional. Walking away isn't about pride. It isn't about proving a point. It's about recognizing that not every opportunity deserves your agreement. A bad deal doesn't become a good deal simply because it's available today. In fact, some of the most expensive mistakes people make begin with the words, "I didn't want to lose the opportunity." Think about how often people stay in situations that no longer serve them. A business partnership that's built on distrust. A job that demands everything but offers no growth. A contract filled with conditions they knew were unfair from the beginning. They stay because leaving feels like losing. But staying can sometimes cost far more. Time, energy, money, peace of mind. The courage to walk away comes from knowing that your future is worth protecting, that another opportunity will come, that saying no today may create space for a much better yes tomorrow. This is why experienced negotiators don't cling to every deal. They evaluate it. They ask, does this move me closer to the life I'm trying to build? If the answer is no, they're willing to leave. Not with anger, not with resentment, but with confidence. Ironically, that confidence often changes the negotiation itself. When people realize you're genuinely prepared to walk away, they begin to take your position more seriously. Not because you've become more aggressive, but because you've shown that your decisions aren't driven by desperation. You've shown that you're negotiating from principles, not pressure. Of course, walking away doesn't always mean the other person will come back. Sometimes they won't, and that's okay. Because the goal of negotiation isn't to win every deal. It's to make good decisions consistently. Over time, that approach protects your reputation. It protects your resources. And perhaps, most importantly, it protects your self-respect. At the end of the day, the best negotiators aren't the ones who convince everyone to say yes. They're the ones who know which deals are worth pursuing and which ones are worth leaving behind. Because every time you say yes to the wrong opportunity, you're quietly saying no to a better one that hasn't arrived yet. And that understanding changes the way you negotiate, not with fear, but with freedom. Make them want to say yes. There's a common misconception about negotiation. People imagine two opponents sitting across from each other, each trying to win at the other's expense. One side celebrates, the other side walks away disappointed. That may happen from time to time, but it's rarely the mark of a great negotiator. Because a deal that leaves one person feeling cheated is usually a deal that doesn't last. The best negotiations don't create winners and losers. They create commitment. When people believe they've been treated fairly, they're more likely to honor the agreement. They're more likely to trust you again. They're more likely to recommend you, work with you, and return in the future. That's why the best negotiators think beyond the moment. They're not just asking, can I get what I want today? They're asking, can I build a relationship that still has value 5 years from now? That shift in perspective changes everything. It changes the questions you ask, the promises you make, the expectations you create, and the way people remember you after the conversation is over. Reputation is one of the most valuable assets you'll ever own. It follows you into every meeting, every partnership, and every opportunity. People may forget the exact numbers in a deal. They rarely forget how you made them feel. Did you respect their time? Did you keep your word? Did you listen before speaking? Did you honor the commitments you made? These things matter more than most people realize, because trust compounds. Every honest interaction makes the next conversation easier. Every broken promise makes the next conversation harder. The same is true in everyday life. Whether you're negotiating with a client, a colleague, a friend, or a family member, the principles remain remarkably similar. People want to feel respected. They want to feel understood. They want to know that their interests matter too. That doesn't mean agreeing to everything. It means recognizing that lasting influence is built on credibility, not pressure. The strongest negotiators don't rely on tricks. They rely on preparation, patience, integrity, and the confidence that comes from knowing they don't have to force an outcome. When you combine those qualities with genuine curiosity about the other person's needs, something interesting happens. Negotiation stops feeling like a contest. It becomes a search for the best possible solution. Not the quickest solution, not the loudest solution, the best one. And perhaps that's the real art of getting what you want. It isn't about becoming more persuasive than everyone else. It isn't about always having the perfect response. It's about becoming the kind of person people want to make agreements with. Someone who is calm under pressure, someone who listens carefully, someone who keeps their word, someone who knows their value without needing to prove it. Because those qualities don't just help you negotiate better, they help you build a better life. In the end, every negotiation is a reflection of something deeper. Your preparation, your character, your patience, and your ability to balance confidence with respect. Master those things, and you'll discover something surprising. Getting what you want has less to do with controlling other people and far more to do with mastering yourself. Every day, whether you realize it or not, you're negotiating. Not just over money, not just over contracts, not just over business. You're negotiating with life itself. Every decision asks something of you. Your time, your attention, your energy, your values. The question is never whether you'll make compromises. The real question is whether you'll make the right ones. Throughout this documentary, we've talked about leverage, listening, patience, framing, silence, and knowing when to walk away. They're all important, but underneath them is a lesson that's even more important. The hardest negotiation you'll ever have isn't with a stranger sitting across a table. It's with yourself. It's the moment you're tempted to accept less than you deserve because you're afraid there won't be another opportunity. It's the moment you're about to speak when listening would serve you better. It's the moment you're ready to react emotionally instead of responding thoughtfully. Those are the negotiations that shape your life, because the way you negotiate with others is usually a reflection of the way you negotiate with yourself. If you don't respect your own boundaries, it's difficult to expect other people to respect them. If you don't value your own time, someone else will happily spend it for you. If you don't know what matters most to you, every attractive opportunity will pull you in a different direction. That's why great negotiators don't just study people. They study themselves. They know their strengths. They know their weaknesses. They know what they're willing to fight for and what they're willing to let go. That clarity is what gives them confidence, not arrogance, not manipulation, just quiet confidence. And perhaps that's the real art of getting what you want. It isn't about winning every negotiation. It isn't about always hearing the word yes. It's about making decisions you can still be proud of long after the conversation has ended. Because a good deal isn't measured only by what you gain today. It's measured by whether it still feels like the right decision tomorrow, next year, and years from now. So, the next time you walk into an important conversation, remember this. Don't ask, how can I make them agree? Ask, how can we reach an agreement that's worth keeping? Because the people who build lasting success don't force outcomes. They build trust. They create value. And they understand that the strongest position in any negotiation is becoming someone whose word is worth saying yes to. That is the real art of getting what you want.